Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel and the series where I recap episodes of the Christian men's talk show right here on YouTube called Shop Talk, hosted by Adeolu Adefarasin. Now, for those of you who have been paying attention, you would have noticed that I missed recapping the episode of 2 weeks ago. That's the episode where Adeolu had Ebuka Obiuchendu and Demi Olubanwo on the show and where they talked about education in Nigeria. But anyway, I'm here now and I'm here to recap the most recent episode, the one of last Friday where Adeolu had as guests his dad, Wale Adefarasin, his uncle, Pastor Yemi Adefarasin, and his brother, Ademola Adefarasin. Very interesting episode. If you haven't seen it, you should check it out. The topic was a very interesting one, generational thinking and basically succession planning in leadership and governance, which is interesting and at the same time very frustrating in Nigeria and in Africa. As many of you watching know, a lot of our leaders in Africa are from a generation or two generations before the current generation. They're a bit old, and it seems like they don't, not that it seems, let me call a spade, they don't want the younger generation or, people after them to come in and take leadership and, rule the country or lead the country, which is very frustrating. It's very annoying. Nigerians often joke that, our leaders have been saying for years and for decades that we are the leaders of tomorrow, but yet they are still there. They've been there since yesterday and maybe even the day before. So it's really frustrating. So that's what they talked about on this episode. And I think Ademola Adefarasin kicked it off by illustrating a relay race and how it's important for everyone in the relay race to do their part. It's really frustrating when somebody does his lap and does not let go of the baton. And that seems to be what we see a lot of in Nigeria. A lot of our leaders do not want to let go of power.
When the first generation, quote unquote, is running, they're holding the baton and they pass it on to the next generation. Yeah? And the next generation take the baton and go on and pass to the next generation. I see that as the way generational thinking should go. Now, what I think about this all the time, what I find is that in this country, no one is releasing the baton.
Now, I think there are a few reasons why our leaders and African leaders and, other leaders around the world who are older and who have held on to power for many, many years, there are several reasons why they don't want to give up power. First of all, because, power is intoxicating first and foremost, but that cuts across to everyone. When you are in a position of power, you get intoxicated, you get drunk on power, and it's hard to let go of. So that's on one side. On another side, especially in Africa, as a leader, you have access to resources and you have access to money. And a lot of these people unlawfully acquire resources and acquire wealth for themselves. And having access to that, it gives them a certain kind of high, and it's what they enjoy as well. And the structures in place to apprehend them and convict them for these things are not really in place. Which leads me to the third point. A reason why a lot of African leaders, and not just Africa to be honest, a lot of other rulers and leaders around the world who don't want to let go of power, why they tend to hold on to power as well is because they are trying to avoid prosecution. Because if they let go of power and the next person comes in and takes over, there's a high likelihood that they will be sought after and chased, and they'll try and prosecute them and incarcerate them. I mean, look at Jacob Zuma of South Africa right now and what he's going through. And there's several other former leaders who have faced similar fates. So that's another reason why a lot of leaders do not want to let go of power up until, their dying day, because they're trying to avoid prosecution. So this, as you'd imagine, is very frustrating for younger generations who want to not necessarily make those leaders, those corrupt leaders, pay for their sins and the injustices that they've put upon the people. Young people are also frustrated because young people tend to have, the world is ever evolving, and so are the solutions to problems. Young people have lots of innovative ideas and solutions that they want to use to develop themselves and develop the nation. And with them not being able to get into power, they don't have the ability, the mandate, or the franchise to execute and implement these ideas that could change the fortune of the country. So we just keep on going in a circle with, the leaders who have been there from 10, 20, 30 years ago, still there, and people not getting solutions to the problems they have. So I think in summary, in a nutshell, that's why we are in the situation that we are in Nigeria and in a few other countries in Africa and in other parts of the world. Now, all this wasn't said on the last episode of Shop Talk. No, this is all me. What was said on Shop Talk was that, I think it was either Pastor Wale or Ademola that said, the problem really is that the leaders are not preparing the next generation to receive the baton. And there's no succession planning in place.
And one of the challenges we have as a nation is that we are not preparing the next generation to receive the baton. One of the most important areas is education. Okay, we need to educate people. We need to understand, you just imagine the relay race that Ademola talked about. If the person that started the race, the first leg of the relay, holds on to the baton and continues to run through the second leg's race, the third leg, through the fourth leg, it looks stupid. He can't win because he'd have run out of steam by the time he gets to the finishing line.
And what that means, when you think about it, when you, as a friend of mine says, when you deep it, you think deeply about it, you realize that when the time does come and the younger generation or this generation gets into power, they're not prepared because, first of all, the older generation who is in leadership now, they, first of all, have set a bad example. That's one. Two, they haven't corrected that example. Three, they haven't tried to tutor or mentor or teach the younger generation on how to do things right and how not to make the mistakes that they made. So there's no attention by the older generation or given by the older generation to the younger generation on how to go about things. So what may happen is that when it's now time for the younger generation, ultimately at some point, they may be a bit clueless or they will repeat the mistakes of their fathers. Because like what Pastor Wale said, he said it's not easy to give what you didn't get or what you don't have. And that's why in marriages or when people grow up and settle down, someone who came from a broken home or a broken marriage, unfortunately, is more likely to have a broken home or broken marriage of their own.
It's a challenge to pass on what you didn't get. And so one has to recognize if you come from a broken home, sad to say this, but the chances are that you are more likely to have a broken home than if you had come, from a happy, warm, and stable home.
And that can easily replicate itself on a national scale. People who have not been shown the way will only just naturally follow what they have seen. And what they have seen thus far is corruption, looting, lying, abuse of the system, abuse of rule of law. And there's a likelihood that may be what is mirrored when they get there. So really, if we're being honest with ourselves, the older generation in leadership, in government, don't care that much about the future of the country and the future leaders, because if they did, they'd be grooming them for leadership and telling them how to go about things and how not to make the mistakes that they made. So that's something that this episode opened my eyes to. Another thing that dawned on me was that I think Ademola also said that, when we are continuing this relay race and we're going in circles, that means we're still dealing with the problems of the generation that's still running the race. And every generation has its issues and its challenges. So in Nigeria, my generation and probably your generation is still facing the challenges and the problems that the generation of leadership was going through back in their time until now. We're still dealing with their issues because they are still the ones occupying the space. It's once they leave the space and they're with their issues that another generation can come in with, new issues or new challenges as the case may be. So that also is a very interesting dynamic and very worrisome dynamic. Another interesting thing that dawned on me from watching this episode is that we're actually not a generation behind. I think we're 2 generations behind because our current leader is over 60. I think he's in his 70s. So I think everyone from 60 and above is one generation. Everyone from between 60 and 40 is another generation. And everyone between 40 and below is another generation. So I think 40 and below are the current generation, I guess, of people who are predominant in the population. So my generation, 40 and below, we're actually 2 generations behind leadership, which is very odd. And it should be our generation that is leading or ruling or doing great things, in government and in the private sector and in the country and the economy. So yeah, it seems like we're actually 2 generations back. So once the current generation in power, once they leave, it's now the baby boomers generation, those between 60 and 40 now, who would, feel it's their time to rule, and they'll do their time before it now becomes my generation's time to lead. At least that's the way a lot of them in power would see it. Very interesting dynamic, very worrisome. Anyway, be sure to check out the episode on generational thinking on Shop Talk's YouTube channel. I'll put a link to it in the description box below. Tell me what you thought about the episode, the dynamic between the Adefarasins, talking at a round table. And also let me know what you think about generational leadership and succession planning in our country. What do you think the way forward is, dare I ask? Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been awesome. And I'm tempted to say, hopefully, for future episodes of Shop Talk, I'll be more current and more on point with my videos and my recap videos, but I really can't make any promises. I'll try my best. How about that? Thanks for watching once again, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.